This is something that really bothers me, and I've always wanted to understand why people keep using it. Shorter wavelengths are more energetic than longer wavelengths. This is correct. For a single photon in quantum physics and in ordinary physics, because photons are units of measure. If you hit somebody with twice as many photons, that's a higher intensity. The intensity is based on the number of photons, but the type of photon, the frequency of them, affects the intensity as well for photons. If you have a variable number of photons and can measure it, it is dominant at frequencies below a certain point, and it is a sliding scale. The energy of electromagnetic waves, which are not directly related to being photons, they are not the same goddamn thing, because electromagnetic waves are, by definition, you could call them to be quantum-based, but we're not talking about an individual photon being released by this wavelength off of the surface of a molecule, or actually an atom, of an electron state changing, produced ultraviolet light or whatever. That frequency change from this wavelength to this wavelength means there's more energy involved being transmuted into that frequency, a vibrational frequency. Frequency is not intensity, except within that very narrow definition. If you are a person who keeps repeating frequency equals intensity, you're a numbskull. The reason we measure the intensity of a radio signal by something other than its frequency is because frequency does not equal intensity. Walk into this. Okay, this is the frequency I'm doing. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. That's the frequency. If I do it faster, I have to exert more energetic activity to create it, but the output is the same wavelength. Well, it's a different wavelength, but it's the same amplitude. If however I go slow, but I go a lot wider, I'm putting off more of a wave shape, but it's a lazy dog way to do it. I'm wagging my tail instead of shaking my finger at you. It's a different frequency. Yes, in a way, in a very narrow definition, if you want to win a fucking argument in the comment section, yes, shorter wavelengths and higher frequencies are more energetic because there's more energetic activity. But this saying of an electromagnetic wave power or energy is dependent on its frequency or wavelength is a lot like saying an anvil that's cold is less weighty. No, it doesn't change it. These are separate dimensions in the measurement of things. Why don't we just measure the frequency of things and derive the wattage output? Because you can have a 1 milliwatt signal at 1 gigahertz or a 1 milliwatt signal at 10 gigahertz. It's still 1 milliwatt. The effect it has on the world is nonlinear. There's a narrow band of frequencies in the infrared range that we perceive as heat and can cause things to heat up because things sympathetically react to heat. They also react to light, but not in the same way. Radio signals cause all sorts of things to sympathetically react, but they don't react the same way. Nuclear radiation, which is literally chunks of atoms flying through space, is not a wave or vibration or your chakra and maracra. It's pieces of atoms flying through space. Radiation is one of the most annoyingly misused words in history, and it's not the radio frequency universe talking about it. It's idiots. The energy of an electromagnetic wave depends on its field intensity, aka how much energy it carries. It's not dependent on frequency. If you go up in frequency, it does not inherently make it a higher energy level or another level of consciousness or any of this other shit. And insisting on using this, it's not anti-science, it's just counterfactual horse shit, and using it to sell your poultices or it's not even heroin for the masses. This is pablum for the masses. You're infantilizing every human being when you misquote this shit. Yes, this is correct, actual, real information for a single photon. But if you have 50 photons, does it change the intensity? How about 5 billion photons? Is that a higher intensity? No frequency changes happened. Walk into this. Yes, a 50 caliber 1-ounce slug will make up one for hell of it. Going a certain speed hitting you is very powerful. But if it's sitting on a table, it doesn't punch a hole through it. It has to have another characteristic besides just one. It could be very dense. It could be made out of some exotic material. It could be very light. Being hit by a 1/2 ton glob of foam might kill you just as much as a 1/2 ton block of a car. The energy level of a radio signal. Stop saying electromagnetic energy is photons and shut up. I know it's technically accurate that really low frequencies or even DC are considered photons. That's nice. And in some universe, you're considered an academic or a genius. But you know what? In the real world, we get to judge things based on what's real. You're not. Radio signals are not directly related as far as their effect or energy level based on wavelength. And doubling the wavelength does not cause a comorbidity in cancer rates. And again, if you increase the frequency, it may be less effective. For the same reason that higher audio frequencies don't actually cause as much damage as low frequencies in some cases, and vice versa. You have to look at what the effect is. And lying about all higher frequencies are bad because intensity is based on you misinterpreting a physics equation that's mostly used for the amount of energy that is required and that also is produced, because you don't get a free lunch, from the light emitting diodes that use blue or ultraviolet LEDs. They put in photons of a specific frequency and get out multiple photons at different frequencies, each of them requiring slightly different energy levels to induce this. Yes, and the frequencies are mostly, but not completely, directly related to the energy requirement or the energy released. Yes, this is true in photons. Congratulations. But a radio signals are measured in watts because that's what's fucking important, and the frequency does not determine wattage. Now, anybody who doesn't understand that may be just constantly verbatim quoting a textbook or somebody's assertion. The higher the frequency, the more intense it is. No, that's not true. Period, full stop. A tiny amount of knowledge about physics is not dangerous, but it sure as hell is ammo in a comment section. To the guy who installs radio transmitter antenna stuff or climbs the towers to do maintenance on them, he could have also been a guy who's just painting them for all we know. No, the frequency of a signal does not determine its effect. The frequency band, specific frequencies, might. No, it doesn't dissolve your cells. No, it doesn't boil your brains or balls. He kept bringing that up. Eyeballs and the others. The higher the frequency, the less penetrative into the tissue it is. Period, full stop. There are super high frequencies like gamma rays that do a lot of damage because they're at the same frequency that is the wavelength that would actually disrupt chromosomes. They actually do affect chemistry, yes. But a radio signal with a wavelength this big won't work on a molecule unless you got a molecule that fucking big or a cell that big. Do you have cells that big? Are you fucking Garjura? Are you Godzilla or Mothra? No? Then it doesn't fucking do that. Because